The message lit up my phone at 3:17 a.m., shattering the quiet darkness of our Boston brownstone. The sudden buzz felt intrusive, pulling me out of sleep with a sharpness that made my heart skip. I reached over, squinting at the screen, and there it was, Michael's name glaring back at me, followed by a text that hit harder than any blow I could have imagined. Sold the beach house. Transferred all the savings to start my new life with Lena. Enjoy being homeless. Lol. I froze. It took a moment for the words to settle in, for the shock to creep through every fiber of my being. I had spent 30 years of my life with this man. 30 years of marriage, memories, love, arguments, and all the little things that had once felt like everything. And now, he was leaving me with nothing but an empty house and a cruel, mocking laugh at the end of his message. Maybe it was the time difference. He was in Bali, just a short 13-hour leap away from me, but I couldn't quite make sense of how casually he wrote those words. Enjoy being homeless. The complete lack of remorse. The arrogance wrapped up in a simple, lol, as if he was sharing some private joke, was almost too much to bear. How had it all come to this? I couldn't help but let out a bitter laugh, though it was more out of disbelief than anything else. 30 years. 30 years of trust, of building a life together, only to be erased in a single, thoughtless text. But in the silence that followed, after the initial rush of anger, something inside me shifted. A cold, detached clarity took over. This wasn't just a betrayal of our marriage, it was a betrayal of everything I had worked for. Everything I had sacrificed for this man and this family. But it was also the wake-up call I needed. I set the phone down on the nightstand, the blue light of the screen casting a ghostly glow in the dark. Michael had been planning this for months, maybe even longer, and I had been blind. But now I saw it all. The signs I had ignored. The late-night phone calls. The way he suddenly became obsessed with fitness. And the bills that piled up without explanation. The lies were everywhere, hidden in plain sight. How had I missed them? I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the decision ahead of me. I couldn't let him get away with this. Not after everything. Not after the life we'd built. My name is Sophia Carson, and at 54, I never imagined I'd be starting over. But now, as I sat in the dark, my fingers trembling slightly as I picked up my phone again, I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to let Michael destroy everything we had without a fight. I typed a single line in response, a calmness settling over me even as my heart pounded in my chest. Check your account balance. And just like that, I knew the game was on. I sat there, phone in hand, staring at the words I had just typed. I didn't expect a response immediately, but I couldn't help but feel a rush of satisfaction at knowing Michael would finally be forced to face the consequences of his actions. He had always prided himself on his secrecy, his ability to control everything around him, until now. Now, the tables were turned, and I had the upper hand. But that didn't stop the questions from swirling in my mind. How had I missed it? How had I not seen the signs sooner? The first real clue had come months ago, right after Michael started working out with his trainer, Lena. At first, I didn't think much of it. He had always been someone who took care of himself. Or at least, he had been when we were first together. But this was different. This sudden obsession with fitness. The constant need to look better. To be healthier. It all seemed innocent enough. Right? Then the gym sessions started to become more frequent. Almost like a ritual. What once had been an occasional jog or swim turned into daily 2-hour workouts with Lena. I had dismissed it at first, chalking it up to a midlife crisis. But it wasn't just the gym sessions that got to me. It was the mounting credit card bills that started appearing out of nowhere. $500 here, $800 there, every month. And when I questioned him about it, he'd snap back, saying he was finally taking care of himself. That this was his self-care. Funny how that self-care never seemed to include any care for me or for our family. As time went on, the signs became more blatant. Password changes on our accounts. Secretive phone calls. Business trips to places I never knew about. Places that coincidentally aligned with where Lena posted pictures of herself on Instagram. I wasn't blind. I knew something was going on. But I wasn't the type to confront him with accusations. No, that wasn't me. Instead, I did what I knew best. I observed. I took notes. I collected evidence. Carefully, methodically, until I had enough to know for certain what he was doing. There was the time when I overheard a conversation in his office. He didn't know I had come home early, that I was resting in our bedroom with a headache. But I heard his voice. Low and intimate, the same tone he used when we first met. The one that had once made my heart flutter. Lena, baby, it's all coming together. The beach house will sell quickly. Sophia will never know. Once that money hits our account, I'll transfer it all to the offshore account we set up. By the time she figures it out, we'll be living the dream in Bali. I had frozen in place. My breath caught in my throat. My heart shattered as the reality set in. This was it. This was the moment when I realized I wasn't just dealing with a cheating husband. I was dealing with someone who was willing to destroy everything we had built. But I didn't panic. I didn't cry. Instead, I did what I had planned for months. I had already contacted Diane, our family lawyer, and with her help, I had put a protection plan in place. We had worked together, quietly, behind the scenes, to make sure that if this day ever came, I would be ready. The court orders to freeze our joint assets were filed the same day. I had thought of everything. The beach house was in my name. But Michael had planned to sell it without my knowledge. Not anymore. The sale was voided before it even had a chance to go through. Now, as I sat there, reflecting on the last few months of meticulous planning, I couldn't help but feel a sense of calm. I knew I had done everything right. I had given Michael every chance to be honest, to be the man I married. But now it was over. And I had to be strong. For me, for our children, for everything I had worked for. Before I share what happened next, the moment that left an entire room of journalists in stunned silence, I want to connect with you. My amazing viewers, where are you watching from? Drop your country's flag in the comments below. And if you've ever had to fight for something you believe in, hit that like button, because this story is just getting started. The morning after sending that final message, I couldn't help but feel an overwhelming sense of resolve. I had taken the first step. But the real battle was just beginning. The weight of what was about to unfold settled heavily in my chest. But there was no turning back now. Michael had made his choice. And I had made mine. I wasn't just going to sit back and let him tear apart everything I had worked for. This would be my fight. My stand for everything I had built over the past 3 decades. I knew that the next move had to be calculated, measured. There would be no room for mistakes. The first thing I did was reach out to Diane, our family attorney, who had been a silent partner in this battle since I first suspected something wasn't right. Diane was more than just a lawyer to me. She had become a trusted ally. Someone I could rely on when the world felt like it was crumbling around me. I explained everything to her once again, the text message, the phone call, the money transfers, and the web of lies Michael had spun. She listened intently, taking notes, her mind already working through the strategy we would need to protect my assets. Let's go over everything, Diane said, her voice calm but firm. You've done well so far. Sophia, we've got a solid case. I felt a sense of pride swell inside me. I wasn't the type to get involved in the nitty-gritty of financial protection plans. But I had learned quickly. Diane had advised me to start documenting everything. And that's exactly what I had done. Every transaction, every phone call, every suspicious move Michael made was now part of the paper trail that would ultimately protect me. I had gone through our financial records with a fine-tooth comb, recording any anomalies, any inconsistencies. I had even hired a forensic accountant to go over the books, ensuring that everything Michael had done could be traced back to his betrayal. But it wasn't just the money. It was the betrayal, the sense of being blindsided, of having spent my entire life with someone who had secretly planned to abandon me. I had to remind myself that this wasn't just about finances, it was about holding onto my dignity, my future, and my family. This was the beginning of reclaiming my life. Diane laid out the next steps. We would file for an emergency court order to freeze all of our joint assets. Michael would not be able to make any more moves behind my back. The beach house, the retirement accounts, everything we had worked for would be legally protected. It was the only way to ensure that Michael couldn't quietly drain our savings and disappear with Lena. As the days passed, I could feel the weight of the upcoming confrontation growing heavier. The phone calls, the meetings, the strategy sessions with Diane, they all became a blur. But every step we took felt more and more like a victory. I had come to realize that the life I had built with Michael, the life I had once thought was untouchable, was now fragile, but the difference was that I was no longer sitting idly by, waiting for things to fall apart. I was taking control. I started making preparations for the inevitable fight that would take place in court. I knew Michael would fight back. He always had to be in control. But he had underestimated me. I had spent years supporting him, quietly taking care of the details while he went about his business. But now, I was the one in charge. I was the one with the power. The court orders were filed. I had Diane's legal expertise on my side. I had the forensic accountant's damning evidence. And most importantly, I had the strength to face whatever was coming. Michael might have thought he could slip away unnoticed. That he could start his new life with Lena without facing the consequences of his actions. But he was wrong. The tables had turned. The battle for my future had begun. And I wasn't going to lose. The first sign that Michael had finally realized what was happening came in the form of a notification on my phone. A ping, sharp, insistent, echoed through the quiet of the house, followed by the unmistakable buzz of a new message. I didn't need to check it to know what it was. I already knew. Michael had finally checked his accounts. And the shock had hit him like a freight train. For the next few hours, my phone seemed to vibrate non-stop. But I ignored each call. I wasn't interested in hearing the lies, the excuses, or the pleas for understanding. Michael had made his choice. And there was no going back. But when the phone rang again, this time with his name flashing on the screen, something shifted inside me. I knew what was coming. And I knew this would be the moment where everything changed. I took a deep breath, steadying myself, and answered. His voice came through the speaker. Ragged, panicked, like a man who had just been pushed to the edge of a cliff. Sophia, what the hell did you do? Michael's words were sharp, his anger barely concealed beneath layers of fear. What did you do to our accounts? This isn't funny. I'm not playing games with you. The familiar arrogance that used to fill his voice was gone, replaced by something else entirely. He wasn't in control anymore. And that realization, more than anything else, felt like a victory. I didn't rush to answer. Instead, I let the silence hang there for a few seconds, long enough for him to feel the weight of what had been set in motion. Then, when I finally spoke, my voice was calm, level, controlled. Good morning, Michael, I said, the words slipping out easily. Though beneath the calm exterior, I could feel the fire of the moment building. I see you checked the accounts. There was a pause on the other end. Then, his voice dropped, turning cold. This is my money, Sophia. You had no right to do this. It's mine. No, I corrected him, feeling a strange sense of detachment. It's our money. It's from 30 years of shared life, hard work, and sacrifice. But you made the choice to steal it. And now you have to live with the consequences. Michael's breath hitched. You're crazy. You know that? He spat. I'll fight this. I'll make sure you regret this. I let out a small laugh. One that was equal parts disbelief and relief. You already lost, Michael. I've already won. There was a brief silence before he responded. His voice quieter now. Desperate. What do you mean? What did you do? His tone was laced with confusion. The reality of his situation finally sinking in. You'll figure it out soon enough, I said, the words sharp and final. But for now, I want you to know something. The beach house transaction? It's voided. The buyers received the court order. You're not selling it. And by the way, the offshore account you set up? It's frozen. The authorities have been notified about potential tax evasion. I could hear the change in him then, his voice faltering. The confident swagger replaced with frantic worry. You've been spying on me? His words were more accusation than question. And it felt almost laughable. No, I replied, my voice steady and sure. I've been protecting myself from your betrayal. There's a difference, Michael. You might want to remember that. I could hear Lena's voice in the background now. Muffled but unmistakable. rising in volume as she realized something was wrong. I couldn't make out the words. But I didn't need to. She had been swept up in his lies. Just as I had been. But unlike her, I wasn't blinded by the fantasy he had sold her. "You're spying on me," Michael yelled again, his voice cracking. "What the hell did you do?" "I didn't spy," I repeated, the calmness in my voice cutting through the chaos on his side. "I made sure I was protected." "Michael, that's something you should have done for me a long time ago. You were too busy planning your escape. Too busy with Lena, but now, you've lost everything." There was another long silence. I could hear the muffled sound of Michael and Lena arguing in the background. Their voices rising and falling. But I didn't care. I wasn't part of their world anymore. I wasn't interested in their drama. I had my own life to rebuild. "Listen, I have a court hearing on Monday," I continued, the finality in my words underscoring the end of this chapter. "You'll need to attend, either in person or via video conference. Your passport has been flagged, by the way. So, good luck with that. You can leave Bali, but you won't be able to enter any country other than the US until this is resolved." The panic in his voice was unmistakable now. "What do you mean, flagged? What does that mean?" "It means," I said, my words cutting through the tension like a knife, "that while you can leave Bali, you'll be detained the moment you try to enter any other country. The judge is concerned you might try to disappear with our assets. You can try to run, but it won't work." I let those words hang in the air, the gravity of the situation settling over him. And then, just as I was about to hang up, I added one more thing. "Oh, and Michael, the children know everything. They've seen the evidence. They've read your text. They know exactly who you are now." The silence that followed was almost deafening. It was the silence of a man realizing that his world was crashing down around him. The day of the court hearing arrived faster than I had anticipated. The moment I had been preparing for, both mentally and legally, was finally here. I had spent countless hours going over the evidence, rehearsing my testimony, and preparing myself for what would undoubtedly be a battle. But as I sat in the waiting area, my back straight and hands clasped tightly in my lap, I couldn't shake the feeling of calm determination that had settled over me. This was it, the moment where everything would be decided. Diane, my lawyer, was by my side, her calm professionalism a steady anchor in the chaos swirling around me. She had been invaluable in helping me prepare for this day, offering both legal expertise and emotional support. I had never realized how much of a battlefield the legal system could be until I found myself thrust into it. But now, I was ready. The courtroom doors opened, and the noise outside seemed to fade as the judge entered. The tall, stern woman took her seat, and the room fell silent. Judge Martinez. I had read her reputation, fair but tough, especially when it came to matters of financial misconduct. I knew she would be the one to help bring justice to this twisted chapter of my life. When Michael and his attorney entered the room, I could feel the tension in the air shift. Michael, once so confident and in control, looked smaller, his shoulders hunched, his eyes scanning the room nervously. The suit he wore hung loosely on his frame, as if it no longer fit the man he had once been. He barely glanced in my direction as he took his seat across from me. His attorney, Gregory Powell, a sharp-looking man with a slick, practiced smile, immediately stood and began to address the court. "Your Honor, my client wishes to assert that there has been a significant misunderstanding regarding the assets in question." Powell began, his voice smooth and rehearsed. The text message, while inappropriate, was sent in poor judgment. But it was never intended to be taken literally. Michael Mercer never meant to harm his wife, Sophia. This is a classic case of a midlife crisis gone too far. I could feel my blood boiling at his words, but I kept my face neutral, refusing to show any sign of weakness. I had been through too much to let him paint this as a simple misunderstanding. Diane stood next, cutting Powell off before he could continue. "Your Honor," she said firmly, "we have substantial evidence that proves Michael Mercer's intentions were far from innocent. My client has gathered documentation from multiple sources, bank records, emails, text messages, witness testimonies, that show a deliberate and systematic attempt to defraud Sophia of her rightful share of the marital assets." As she spoke, The room fell quiet. The judge leaned forward, her sharp gaze never leaving Diane as she outlined the evidence, the financial transactions, the secret accounts, the forged property documents, the recordings of phone calls where Michael discussed the sale of the beach house. Each piece of evidence that Diane presented seemed to pierce through the defense's arguments, laying bare Michael's calculated betrayal. When Diane finished presenting, it was my turn. I stood, my hands steady despite the storm raging inside me, and walked to the witness stand. The judge's eyes were on me, waiting. Michael's eyes, however, were averted. He couldn't even meet my gaze. I took a deep breath and began speaking, my voice clear and unwavering. I spent 30 years of my life building a family with Michael. I said, my words slow but deliberate. We built a life together, a future, and then, in one moment, I was handed a text message that shattered everything. I learned that everything I thought I knew was a lie. He planned to steal our life savings, sell our family home, and run off with someone else. I trusted him. I gave him my heart, my loyalty, and he repaid that with deceit. The words hung in the air, the weight of them sinking in as I continued. I'm here today not just to protect what's mine, but to protect my dignity, my future. Michael's actions were not a mistake, they were a calculated betrayal. One that threatened everything I had worked for. And I won't let him get away with it. As I finished speaking, I could feel the eyes of everyone in the courtroom on me, some sympathetic, others critical, but I didn't flinch. I had already made my peace with the consequences. I was no longer the woman who had silently accepted betrayal. I was the woman who had fought back. Michael's attorney tried to refute my testimony, but the evidence spoke louder than any words could. When Michael was finally called to the stand, I could see the desperation in his eyes. The once confident man, who had thought he could orchestrate his escape without consequence, now looked small and defeated. He stumbled over his words, trying to explain away the lies. But nothing he said could erase the proof in front of us. The judge was silent, her face stern, as she listened to his attempts to defend the indefensible. After what felt like hours of back and forth, the judge finally spoke, her voice cutting through the tension in the room. The court has reviewed the evidence and found overwhelming proof of attempted fraud, financial misconduct, and emotional betrayal, she said, her eyes locking onto Michael. Mr. Mercer, your actions have been reckless. And the court does not take this lightly. The protective orders placed on your assets will remain in place. And further attempts to circumvent these orders will result in legal penalties. Michael's face drained of color. He opened his mouth to say something, but no words came out. His defeat was absolute. The judge turned to me then. Mrs. Mercer, she said, her tone softer now, but no less resolute. The court recognizes the hardship you've endured and the strength you've shown in bringing this matter to light. You will retain full control over the marital assets during the divorce proceedings. And the beach house will remain in your name. As I left the courtroom, I felt a rush of emotions, relief, vindication, and an overwhelming sense of finality. It wasn't just a legal victory. It was a personal one. I had fought for everything I had. And I had won. The days following the court hearing felt like a blur. I had been granted what I needed, control over the assets, the beach house, and the peace of mind knowing that Michael's schemes had been uncovered. But the victory wasn't as sweet as I had imagined. There was still the weight of the last 30 years to process. The years of trust and love I had poured into a marriage that had crumbled beneath the weight of deceit. It wasn't just the financial betrayal that hurt. It was the emotional toll. The shattering of the person I thought I knew so well. I spent the first few days in a haze, walking through the house in a kind of numb state. It was strange, realizing that everything I had worked for had been laid bare in front of me. The life I had built with Michael was gone, but the remnants of it still lingered around me in the form of old photographs, mementos, and memories that now felt foreign, tainted by the truth. The children, Thomas and Elise, had been there for me every step of the way. They had seen the evidence, read the texts, and understood the magnitude of what Michael had done. Still, I could see the hurt in their eyes whenever they spoke about their father. They loved him, despite everything, and that made it all the more difficult. I had always tried to protect them from the harsh realities of adult life. But they had been thrust into the mess of it all. I couldn't help but feel guilty, even though I knew I had done nothing wrong. One evening, as I sat in the living room with Thomas and Elise, the weight of it all seemed to settle on my chest once more. The silence between us was comfortable, but it also felt heavy. Elise, always the more emotional one, broke it first. "Mom, I know you've been through a lot," she said softly, her voice full of concern. "But I want you to know, you're not alone. We're here for you, and no matter what happens, we'll get through this together." Her words hit me harder than I expected. I hadn't realized how much I needed to hear that. For so long, I had been carrying everything on my own, shielding them from the worst of it. But now, I didn't have to. They were standing beside me, ready to face whatever came next. A few weeks later, after the legal battles had finally settled and the divorce papers were signed, I found myself standing on the deck of the Cape Cod beach house. The air was crisp, the waves crashing gently against the shore, and the sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the water. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. It was as if I had been holding my breath for so long. And now, I could finally exhale. I had fought for this house, for my financial security, and for my future. But more importantly, I had fought for my own sense of self-worth. I had spent so many years living in the shadow of Michael's success, putting his needs above mine, sacrificing my own desires for the sake of our family. But now, I was reclaiming my life. I was starting fresh, and for the first time in a long while, I felt free. I spent the next few months rediscovering who I was. I started picking up old hobbies I had abandoned, painting, reading, even taking long walks on the beach just to clear my mind. But it wasn't just about finding peace within myself. I wanted to help others who had faced similar betrayals. I began working with financial experts and lawyers to create workshops for women who had been financially abused or betrayed. I shared my story, hoping to give others the strength to take control of their own lives. Just as I had done, the first workshop I hosted was more fulfilling than I could have imagined. The room was filled with women who had been through the same heartache, the same struggles, and in their faces, I saw a reflection of myself. I was no longer just the victim. I was a survivor, and I was determined to help others find their strength, just as I had found mine. As the months passed, I began to see the fruits of my labor. I received messages from women all over the country, thanking me for sharing my story and giving them the courage to take action in their own lives. It wasn't easy, and I knew the road ahead would still have its challenges. But I was no longer afraid. I had learned to embrace my resilience, to trust in my own abilities, and to fight for what I deserved. One evening, as I sat on the porch of the beach house, looking out at the horizon, I couldn't help but reflect on how far I had come. I had lost so much, but in the process, I had gained so much more. I had gained my independence, my strength, and the knowledge that no matter what life threw at me, I could handle it, and that, in the end, was the greatest victory of all. Before we wrap up this story, I want to thank all of you for joining Sophia on her journey. Her story is not just about betrayal and heartache, but also about strength and resilience. If you found inspiration in her journey, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss any future stories. Share this with anyone you think could relate or find hope in it. Leave a comment below to let me know what you think about Sophia's journey. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.